Okay, welcome back to our fourth video having to do with scripting, and I'm going to continue talking about the if command, and I'm going to talk about other operators you can use with the if command. So to start off, I'm going to talk about the not operator, and what the not operator does is it changes the meaning of your if tests to be the opposite. So for instance, for the example here, if not defined, then do something. So previously we were checking to see if a variable existed, and if it did exist, we would do something. Now with the not, we're saying if it's not, or I'm sorry, if the variable does not exist, or if the variable is not defined, then do something. So I can show you how that works simply by going to the command line. And I was fooling around with testing things a little bit ago. So if I do echo save, %save dir, I've got a variable there called save dir, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete it simply by doing setting it equal to nothing. So set save dir equals, and so now if I do echo, it echoes back the text %save dir % because there is no variable called save dir that exists. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if not defined, excuse me, save dir, and notice again with the defined, we're not looking for the value of the variable, we're looking for the variable itself, and it doesn't exist. So now I should be able to set save dir equals to hold, I'm just going to do hold value just to give it something so that it creates it. So since it's not defined, it doesn't already exist, we can do echo, and it has hold value. So now since it already is defined, if I rerun this we can rerun the if command, and this should not work. So what we're saying here, if save dir is not already defined, then set it to be equal to something, and I'm going to set it to be equal, this should not work. So since the variable already exists, the set command should not get executed. So let's see what happens. Oops, sorry, hit the wrong key. And I'm going to have to retype that, I bet. Yep. Okay, so hold on. Okay, so now I'm going to hit enter, and it runs. I don't get any error messages. Let's see what the value of save dir is. It's still the hold value. So instead of checking to see if a variable is defined, that it already has a value, we're checking to see if it is not defined. So that's what not does in this instance. Now, the other example I give here, if a particular directory does not exist, then we want to create the directory. So I can demonstrate that. And let's do a dir command to make sure I don't have a Word documents directory. So if not exist, so we're checking to see if some item inside the directory doesn't exist, and I'm checking for Word documents, and I'm making sure that it checks for a directory by putting a backslash at the end of it. So if that doesn't exist, I want to create it. So I already checked that it doesn't already exist. Excuse me. So I'm going to go ahead and just run this. And now I do dir, and I now have a new directory there since it already didn't exist. So this is a way to do some checking to get things created in one fell swoop by doing a simple if. And if I rerun this again, I can simply change my if. Instead of creating it, I can just say echo directory exists. Okay, so we'll run this. If not exist Word document, create it. And notice that I don't get an echo because the not exist is checking to see if it isn't already there. And since it's already there, the echo doesn't get executed. Okay. Now, in the PowerPoint, another comparison I can do is I can see if two strings are equal. In other words, two text items are equal. Now, when I was using the if in the previous video, I typed three letters, E, Q, and U for equals. So using two equal signs back to back like this is the same as doing EQU, but the two equal signs only work for text. If you're trying to compare, say, some numbers or something like that, it won't work. So even though two equal signs are there available for you, EQU always works, no matter what you're comparing. But I wanted to put that there to show you do have this other comparison operator you can use. And I do give you an example. Since I'm a Beatles fan, I decided to kind of throw something in there about John Lennon. All right. Some other operators is, here's the EQU again. It stands for equals. Now, there are several operators here, and I'm not going to go through and demonstrate every single one. I think the example I give here should be fairly self-explanatory, at least I hope they are. We have not discussed the go-to command yet, but I do say go to another part of the script with the label start after 45, for instance, for here, for not equal. But you get the idea of how you can use different operators and what they mean. And greater than or equal to. All right. Okay. So before we actually get to some of the other commands like go to and what a label means, there's some more items here for excuse me, for grouping commands together, especially on an if statement. You can also use some of this without if statements, but wanted to show it to you here, and I do use the if command for examples. So the first conditional or compound character I want to show you is the ampersand. And what this allows you to do is to have two or more commands on one line. Now, the ampersand doesn't affect how the commands will execute, it just allows you to put multiple commands on one line. So for instance, let me go to the command line here, and I can have an echo first command, then an ampersand, then echo second command, ampersand, and dir test dir. So what I've got here is I've actually got 3 commands. Instead of typing them on separate lines and hitting enter after every single one, I've got them listed and separated with the ampersand character. And the ampersand character, by the way, is the shift character above the 7 on the numeric row of your keyboard. And then I have another command, in this case happens to be another echo, and then finally I have a third command which is going to give me a directory listing of the testdir directory, and all 3 of these will be executed one at a time, and they all will be executed. There's nothing about using the ampersand that says that one should be executed only if the first one works or something like that. There is another command that I will show you that does that sort of thing. This doesn't happen to be it. So now when I hit enter, we get the first command from the echo, the second command text from the second echo, and then finally a directory. So you can use that as part of ifs, or you can simply use it inside your script to have several commands execute to save a little bit of space. There's nothing else special about it. All right. Now, I showed you opening and closing parentheses earlier when I demonstrated that in an if, when you have some more complicated commands, you may have to enclose them inside parentheses. But using parentheses allows you to do something else as well, as far as grouping multiple commands within an if statement. And I have an example here. So what it allows you to do is you can have your multiple commands on separate lines so that they're a little bit easier to read. Now, since this particular if is in scripting on the Windows command line, isn't a true programming language, you have to have the else on the same line as your if part. So that makes it a little bit of a pain, I guess, to actually indent the separate lines that are part of your else group. But it does allow you to have the commands on separate lines. And what I've done is in my scripts directory, I created a little test script called exist test that is actually this example in a script. So let me show you what that is by simply doing a type exist test.bat. And it's the exact same list of items of commands. So you can see how it would look like in a script. So I have echo, I have a remark here for a comment, and the rem command is, I'm not sure if I listed that as saying that's short for the remark command, but that's my comment command. So then I have if exists %1 and a backslash because I'm checking for a directory name from the name you gave me. And then I have each of the commands on a separate line. So I don't have any directories in here, but I don't want to create a directory in my scripts directory. So what I'm going to do is go back up, dir. So what have I not used for a test directory name? Not too much. So I have testdir2 there. I could go for testdir3. So what will happen is that for this directory, if the directory exists, it's simply going to set the save dir variable to be equal to that, and then it's going to change directory and put me in that directory. So if it doesn't exist, then it's going to still do the set, but it's going to create the directory and then put me in the directory with a cd command. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the exist test script with the testdir2 directory, so I can show you how that'll work like that, to show you this does work. So if I do exist test testdir2, system cannot find the path specified. It's interesting because it did that to me earlier as well, and I'm not sure. It seemed to work when I ran it the second time, and I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. As you can see, I ran it again. I didn't change anything. I didn't retype it in, and it seemed to work. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there, and I am in the testdir directory, and I don't have anything in there. So let me go back up, and I'm going to re-execute the command with testdir3 since that does not exist. A subdirectory or file testdir2 already exists. So I must not be setting something quite correctly because it's looking for testdir2 when I specified testdir3. Let me just double check I don't have a script like that here. It's just acting very weird. So let's do a quick check using Notepad. And I was running some other tests, so what we'll do is I'll just close this and open. No, I don't want to save those. So I'm going to open scripts, and I'm going to select all files, otherwise the scripts don't show up. And there's my exist. So if exist %1 set savedir equal to %1, so there's nothing there that I'm doing that's necessarily wrong. What I'm going to do is I'm going to alter this. So I'm going to set savedir to be equal to %1, and then I'm going to test for savedir. I don't know if that'll make any difference. Let's find out. And I no longer need the set command here, so we can delete that. I no longer need the set command here, so we'll delete that. Okay. Okay, change. Okay, I didn't forget parentheses anywhere. No. Alright, so we'll save this. Alright, so, and I'm there. So, did testdir3 get created? No. Alright, so let's try running this again. Okay, that seemed to work just fine. Now let's try it with testdir4 just to see what's going on here. Now it seems to run fine. So, for whatever reason, I think the exist command doesn't really like testing using the parameter values. It prefers to check the regular variables. I don't know why. As you could see, if you reran it, it runs fine most of the time. So it looks like, just as a note for creating your scripts, if you're going to do some checks using the parameters, it may be safer to go ahead and assign your parameters to a variable first before doing that check. That's the only thing I can think of that's causing an issue there. At least with the exist command, because using the parameter variable elsewhere for the checks when I did equals, it seemed to work fine. So again, that's the only thing I can think of that is causing the problem, and changing those few lines seemed to fix it. Alright. Okay. Now, as far as some of the other commands we can use, there is something called a caret, which is a shift character above the 6 on the number row of your keyboard. What that does is, as you can see here in this example, is you can use that in front of a special character and then use that special character in file or directory names. However, I also point out here that double quotes work just as well and are easier to type as you're typing along. So I think the caret's kind of a holdover from the past, but you can simply just use double quotes and you'll be fine. Alright, now moving along with the 2 ampersands. Now I mentioned briefly before about using a single ampersand allows you simply to have multiple commands on one line. It doesn't do anything else. However, having 2 ampersands right next to each other does affect how commands work. And the way it works is the second command listed only executes if the first command is successful. So we can demonstrate that here. In my example, you're going to create a directory, and if the directory created is successful, go ahead and do a copy. It's a little bit hard to demo something like this, but or demonstrate, I'm sorry. I've gotten into the habit of saying demo instead of demonstrate. But what we can do is on the command line, since we do have several test directories, I can say something like this. md test dir 4 ampersand ampersand. So what I'm saying is create test directory 4, and if that's successful, then go ahead and copy all the text files into test dir 4. So what should happen is, since test dir 4 already exists, the create command will not work, so the copy command should not execute. So remember, with the 2 ampersands, the second command only executes if the first one works. So let's go ahead and try this. And I get an error message. It says the subdirectory or file already exists. So I should not have any text files copied into the directory. And I don't. Alright, so that works exactly the way it was supposed to. Now, the other command associated with that is 2 vertical bars. And the difference here is if when you use the 2 vertical bars, the second command only executes if the first command failed. So, using the same example, I can change this to do something like this. So I have 2 vertical bars, just like having 2 of the redirection bars, but they serve a different purpose here. This is not redirection. So you have 2 vertical bars. So I can say echo directory wasn't created. I'm not going to say directory already exists because you really don't know for sure if that's why the create directory command failed or not. All you know at this point is that the command did fail. So if I run this, I get the standard error that was displayed previously. Subdirectory or file already exists, but then I also get my echo text, which is directory wasn't created. So just a quick demonstration of an example of how those two work. Alright, now finally, after using goto in examples, here's what goto does. It literally tells the script to go to a different part of the script. But what you do is you have to tell it to go to a name, and that's called a label. And labels are created with text, but the very first character has to be a colon. This guy right here inside parentheses. And the parentheses are just there to indicate that this is the character I'm talking about. You do not type the parentheses. You only type the colon. So, in a script, let me open up a script. Instead of having all of these commands listed here, you could instead, for the else, tell it to go to create directory. So that makes your ifs a little bit simpler. So now what I need to do is create a label. Remember, the first thing has to be a colon, and the label I'll create is just this create directory. And I'm going to paste that there. So then these two commands will be executed, and then after that it just simply goes and executes whatever commands are after that. So that's what goto does for you. It allows you to bypass other commands and go to a particular part of your script. Now you can use the goto command to create a loop so that you can go back up to the top of your script and execute the same commands over again. And then you use an if to simply stop looping like that. So there, before I talk more about that use of the goto, what I want to show you is there's a special label called EOF for end of file. So what that allows you to do is simply stop the script from executing. So you simply tell it to go to :EOF. Now you don't actually create a label called :EOF. What you do is you simply use goto to do that. Now I should mention that's considered bad programming format. You should always have your commands go to the same spot to exit from the script you're using. So as far as good programming, you could do something like go to end of script. And then the very last thing in your script would be a label that's end of script. All right, so that's considered better programming technique than simply having a go to end of file that's end of your program. All right. So I'm trying to think of a good example using that. So we could do something like do a check. So we could have if chk %1 whoops, hit tab by accident, sorry, equals check go to end of script. So that would be one way you could do it, but since you're checking for the existence of a parameter, what you really should do is go to param error, which is short for parameter error, so you don't type it all the way out, although you can. Parameter error, and then you'd have another label say somewhere about here. That would be your parameter error label, and then inside here you'd echo parameter wasn't specified, and then you simply go to end of script. So what you're doing is, instead of having a lot of commands up here with your if statements, in this case you want to check if they did not specify a parameter. You go to where you have your commands to handle that they didn't have a parameter or specify a parameter. In this case, we display an error message and then end the script. All right. So that's how you would use a goto properly inside your script to end your script, rather than simply use the end of file. But I did want to mention it, that you do have this. So you could simply just simply go EOF like this. Now notice again, it's a special parameter, so you don't specify EOF anywhere else in your script. And notice that there is a colon in front of EOF when you use it. But in normal, when you're going to go to a label, you don't use the colon up here. All right, so I know that's a little bit confusing. But remember, it's when you go to a label you create, you do not specify the colon as part of the go-to command. You only specify the colon when you create the label down here where I have parameter error. Okay, so EOF is the only time that you ever specify the colon when you use the go-to command. Okay? All right. So let's keep going here. So some other things you should be aware of when you're doing scripts is you may not want the error messages displayed that excuse me, that the system displays. And the way you do that is by redirecting error messages to something called null. Excuse me, I just took a drink there. Now, if you've had Linux before, you know that Linux also has a special null that you can redirect error messages to. And this is not a typo. In Windows, it's just spelled N-U-L with a single L. And in Linux, you know that null is spelled with two L's. So not my apologies, my condolences. Again, this is something to remember that is different on the two systems and close enough to give you a little bit of a headache trying to remember it. But this is not a typo. It really is just N-U-L with a single L. All right. So how do you redirect error messages? Well, there's a special redirection symbol or command, well, symbol, I guess is the best way to say it, that you use. You use a 2 followed immediately by the greater than sign. That specifies that you want error messages to be redirected someplace. Now you could use this to redirect error messages to a text file if you wanted to, but in this case I'm using an example of that you can redirect the error messages to null. And it's just how I have the example here is you can, well, let me go to the command line, and we can use it right here with this testdir. So unfortunately, you can't combine them. At least I don't recall that you can. So this will be interesting to see if this will work okay. But I don't think it's going to work. We'll find out. Now, just like any other command, you don't have to capitalize null. So let's see if this will work. Oh, good, it will. I hadn't tested it yet. I wasn't sure if it was going to work. I couldn't remember if it would or wouldn't. But it will. So you can have redirection as part of your command when you use either the ampersands or the 2 bars. So essentially what I did is the first command is everything connected with MD. So you make directory test directory 4, and then redirect error messages to null. And then if this command doesn't work, use the echo command to display the message that you want to display. All right. So what is null? It's a special device, for lack of a better word, that you can send messages to, and they just go away. One kind of geeky term that gets used is called the bit bucket, which means the bucket where all the stuff goes that you don't want to see again. All right. So that's how you can get rid of error messages. Now, one command I have not yet talked about is the shift command. And that's how you go about moving variables from one or values from one parameter to another parameter so that you can reuse it. And you would, even when you don't have more than 9 parameters, and talked about this in the very first video and at the beginning of the PowerPoint, you can use it with other parameters so you can create a loop. So for instance, here in the PowerPoint, I talk about checking if the parameter is not equal to chk. That would mean a parameter got specified. So you can then set a value variable to be equal to the parameter. Then you can utilize a single ampersand to do a shift, and then go to the start of the script. Else go to end of script, which means that the person did not specify anything, or it also means that there simply is no more parameters to be used. So this is how you can create a bit of a loop to allow you to do multiple things. To do multiple things with multiple variables. Now, this is if I have here as an example is a very simple if. Normally what you would do is you would want to, as you read each parameter in, you would want to do something with that parameter rather than simply assign it to a variable and then loop again. So in a script, using the not equals, we could do something like this. If is not equal to check, we want to go to our process parameters, and I'm going to delete a lot of things here. Let's see how I want to do this. So alright, so I'm actually going to get rid of this. Alright, so else, so now this may not be an error. The problem here is that what we want to do is we want to process this parameters over and over again. So what we actually will need is we'll need two if statements, checking chk %1 is, this is not a good use. What we really want to do is you want to check at the start if %1 is not equal to %1, but you want to have two of these. So let me actually, I'm going to copy this. Alright, now you want to have two because you want to have one that's going to check to see if they actually specified any parameters at all. Alright, so we want to change this back to equals. So the very first thing we want to do is we actually want to check to see if they specified a parameter. So if they didn't specify any parameters, we want to go to our parameter error section, and then we're just going to display an error message and exit. But now we want to actually start looping. So start of script. All right? So we actually want to process the parameters. Else, we want to go to end of script. So basically, the very first thing we want to do is check if they remember to specify a parameter with this script at all. And if they didn't specify any parameters, we jump down here to parameter error, and we give an error message and then exit. All right. But if they have specified a parameter, we want to actually start processing those parameters. So we have to have another if to check to see if the we still have a parameters, because we're going to be looping. Then we're going to be, at some point, we're going to run out of parameters anyway. All right, so let's say we then want to set save var equals %1. Then we want to do something with save var, and I'm just going to use a remark, a comment, to do something with the save var variable. Okay, and then after that, what you would do is simply go to start of script. But I forgot one thing. All right, remember our shift. We need to make sure we shift the parameters back down to 1. So shift before we go back up to the start of the script. So what ends up happening when you use the shift is it will move the value of parameter 2 into the value of parameter 1. Parameter 1 simply gets, the value of parameter 1 simply gets forgotten. All right, once it's gone, once it's shifted, it's gone. So that's why you have to make sure you do your processing for the first parameter, and then you shift to get to the next value. So in the script, what I then have is you don't do any shifting until you've processed your very first parameter. So that's also why you need to check to see if you do have a parameter to even start processing. So at some point when you shift, you're not going to have any more values. So the value in parameter 1 will be nothing, just as if somebody had not specified anything. And so then you will want to go to the end of the script. But at this point, it's not an error. It just means you don't have any more parameters to process. Okay. So that's how you use shift in a script. All right. So I know that's a lot, and we're actually all done. This is the last slide. And what I have here is I have an actual script that would work using several of the techniques we've used. And I've got a copy here that checks to see if you've specified files or if you've specified directories. Because remember, you have to use different commands depending if you use a copy, or I'm sorry, if you specified a file or if you specified a directory. So we don't have any looping here, so I don't have any start examples, but you can see how you can create a fairly complicated script without having a lot of lines. You can make something that is fairly useful for you. All right, so that's it for the video. That's all for scripting. You can play with these commands in scripts, in files. You can play with the script I have here. I think I've got it debugged completely. I really did run this script through and test it. Hopefully I didn't make any typos when I typed it in. Basically I copied and pasted it. So hopefully I didn't introduce any typos. Alright, so that's it. That's the last video for scripting. Thanks for watching.